Just making a little update here, video update of the whole systems research farm. Some of you have been asking for it, and we've been busy in the growing season. Now we've been getting busy into the ski season, and we're quite busy in the studio with design projects, but I had some time today to just make a little video update, and also because the power's out right now, and I realized after the past few hours of doing some work that most folks, I'm getting texts from people who can't go to work, can't go to school because the power's out, and our life is, still totally normal and productive today, even though the power is out. And unfortunately, that's not that typical, I guess. There's really no good reason for that, but that was just stimulated me to want to actually make this video update today. So we're in mid-December now. We've gotten about 20 some odd inches of snow in the last handful of days, and there's more to come. It's been heavy wet snow, so that's why the power has gone out. You can see it's totally beautiful. A lot of the beech still holding its leaves. There's a lot of snow clinging to branches, so it's pulling a lot of trees down onto power lines. Just a beautiful weather event we've been having. Hopefully we'll get another foot or 2 or 3 out of this. That would be a real gift. The slate sheds incredibly well as standing seam metal, and better than ag metal. You can see in the building here, the barn has ag metal, and it sheds it alright, but those are the same pitches. That's a 10-12 pitch, and that's a 10-12 pitch, and I think in part it sheds it because it picks up just a little bit of heat. There's no direct sun. I mean, it is fully overcast and has been for days, but the sun still has the light still has enough energy to really warm that slate up just a little bit. I think that's part of what's going on, and it makes more a slick surface for the snow to slide. Snow sliding off roofs is a good thing. You don't want to hold snow on roofs. That's a funny old wives' tale or something, because people say, well, the snow is insulation. Well, if you need the snow as insulation, then your building didn't get insulated very well. Snow is a great insulator for the ground, and that's an appropriate place to think of it as insulation. The greenhouse. Little trick that I'm learning this year is leave the door to the root cellar open during days where there's really no solar gain happening, at least appreciable solar gain in terms of heat. Still bright, very bright, in part because of the snow in the landscape, but also because of the siding in this greenhouse, enough to actually help out the kale and some of the greens that are overwintering here. This kale has quite a bit of new growth on it, all from just the last few weeks, really. We transplanted this kale about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and it started to grow after a couple weeks of it being transplanted. There's an understory of a variety of greens coming up, including cilantro, some transplanted parsley. That understory will come up and really be edible much later in the winter when the sun really comes out, which isn't until February here. We don't really have sun in November, December, January. There's very minimal sun. And you can see it's gotten it got just below freezing in here, but that's before I started figuring out the whole root cellar door trick. So this is, you can see that, but it basically is, let me put it on manual here. It got just below freezing, and that was a few weeks ago before I started opening the the root cellar door. It got freezing over there, but it didn't freeze over here. You can see there's still peppers that are pretty happy. Actually, there's flowers on some of them, and there's Suriname cherries, some cool tropicals in here that are fine. We can always cover those with remay if we want to, or we could fire up the wood stove, but the wood stove's really, we're finding ourselves only using it a few times a year in the spring after things are already started, like vegetable starts are already going in here, and there's some very unusual, or maybe more typical every year, kind of wild cold snap happening very late in the year. So that's a little bit of an insurance policy against really aberrant late season cold. There's piping in here, tubing in here from when we did the Jean Pain mound a few years ago, which comes through the wall here. It would have been better to have that tubing go underground and then outside, and then have a port to actually access hot water to the greenhouse. So if you're thinking about building a greenhouse or any building, make sure you have plenty of sleeves underground, plumbed in. This would be a good place to do it, right about maybe about down here, you know, below frost, or as close to below frost as you can. We've done that in our other new buildings, and we actually do have multiple sleeves in here, but for the Jean Pain mound, we were just trialing that, so we didn't really go out of our way to tap into them. This is, for instance, a cap that we can actually utilize for a new drain if we ever need to. Who knows? Things need to be adaptive. We might want to put a sink here someday, or a hot tub, or a shower. So we've actually put in drains, multiple drains throughout here. They're all under the burlap here and under the ground by a few inches. They go through the sand bed, down through the insulation, and then out. We've also, you can't see it now, but under this kale, there's another similar pipe to that that goes through the foundation and then comes up and tees out right here, so we could tap into it, because there's a thought of potentially someday bringing excess heat in from the studio out there, the top floor of the top of the bottom level of the studio, where it gets very warm because there's a wood stove down there, and bring excess heat actually into here via gravity, because this is higher in elevation, so it wouldn't need a fan at all. This is really cool. I started noticing this a couple summers ago, right after this greenhouse was built. Look at all these worms. So the paths of the greenhouse have become a worm production zone. We're basically gardening worms. They're pretty slow moving right now because it's so cold. We're gardening worms in here in the paths, and what we started to do when we realized the worms wanted to happen here, we started feeding them. It's just like working with mycelium and working with a lot of other life forces in a human facilitated ecosystem, in an intentional ecosystem. So what we did was started to just put some bedding from the geese and ducks and chickens, this manure. Some of this actually is, this manure is only a few weeks old. We've just put their bedding, their pooped up bedding, hay, and poopy hay basically, and we put it down, and they digest it very quickly. So we basically lift up the burlap, put down some pooped up hay, cover it back over, and then we go, when we water the greenhouse, we actually water the paths as well as the beds themselves. So we water the kale, we water the salad greens, we water our vegetable our propagations on the shelves here, but we also water the paths down. And then when we need worms for the composting toilet, we just dig in here with our hands, throw them in a bucket, bring it in. Or if we need worms to put into the vegetable garden in the spring, worms in the compost, we're always kind of inoculating the site with this source of worms. Just like you can't have too much compost, you really can never have enough worms active in your site. Okay, here's our backup power system. As I mentioned, the power is out, and it's been out for probably about 12 hours. And I have my Coleman lantern going here just because it's a little dark in this corner where I have the backup power system. This is the extent of it. It's like $200 backup power system. You don't need a giant battery systems. Batteries suck, they're toxic, they don't last all that long. Although if you take care of them, they can last a lot longer than if you don't, and taking care of them is tricky. You got to keep them very well charged and never drain them very much at all. But they don't have to be very extensive, because if you don't rely on electricity for crucial needs, which is the most resilient way to go, it's very hard to make electricity on site. You're relying on an endless flow of parts at best to do so. The most directly resilient strategy is to not rely on electricity for crucial functions. But it's nice to have. And there are some functions which it's especially nice to have. That's for lighting, like charging headlamp batteries in particular. Also being able to run a modem. So right here we have the modem. That's what's making this noise, is a 700 watt inverter right here. And I have a couple of these, because 2 is 1, 1 is none, and they're cheap. They're not made very well. The trip light ones are okay. Actually, I have more than 2 around. I have a few others. I have trip light, a couple of these 700 watters, and that's enough to run our modem so we have internet. Because 98% of the time when we lose power, we still have our phone lines. So we have DSL, so we have internet. So then all of a sudden, I can keep working. I can see a satellite image. I can get the news. I can get a whole lot of information about the outside world, which is really handy and useful. We keep these batteries topped off with this thing seems made pretty well. It's a Charge Pro. It's a 6 amp trolling motor charger. So I plug this into my USB. This is an uninterruptible power supply, a trip light, and this guy is decent quality. I've had some break. But it also has a little bit of a battery system, so for short intermittent losses of power, this runs the modem just fine, but the battery will die on this in short order, maybe half an hour to an hour max, depending on what size you get. And then I have to walk down and just take the plug from the modem, which is right there, and grab it from here, bring it over to the 700 watt inverter, flick the switch on back here, turn that on. I can charge headlamp batteries. I also can do that with solar panels, which I have in a different building. And I could also plug in my Makita cordless drill charger, which is pretty crucial, especially in a power grid down situation, because you're going to need your cordless tools after a while to help neighbors, because they're going to need a hand fixing a lot of things that go wrong, because your average home, and same with the homes around me, don't have heat when the power's down. They can't flush a toilet. They can't go to the bathroom very adequately. They don't have water, and a lot of other basic functions. They don't have light, and a lot of them, a lot of the houses will actually, even around here, will freeze because their furnaces won't run when the grid is down if it's cold out. Now hopefully you have at least a backup wood stove, if not a primary, but a lot of people don't even have that. So it's really simple to have your basic needs met when the grid is down and not depend on that, at least for crucial functions. That starts with a wood stove for sure, and a baseline source of wood heat. But it can move up the list to having a small backup electric system like this. Certainly having food storage like a root cellar is really key. Having a passive source of water like a spring or ponds you can get it from, or some rainwater stored, is really key as well.